Hello, today is October 6th, and if you're here for Best Practices for Developing Policies and Procedures with Dave White and Rob Hanna, you are in the right place. We've got about 600 people signed up for today's show, and as everyone's joining us here at the beginning, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping information. I'm your host, Scott Abel, the Content Wrangler. We hope that you'll join our mailing list and get access to exclusive content, sneak peek at new tools, and some invites for discounts at in-person conferences. Our list is called the Insiders List. We hope you'll join it today at thecontentwrangler.com. Today's show is brought to you by Precision Content. And if you're moving to DITA but don't know how to get started, Precision Content offers a full suite of services including information architects and writers ready to support your transition to intelligent content. To unlock the knowledge in your expertise, visit precisioncontent.com. Today's show is also sponsored by Quark Enterprise Solutions. Quark's content automation solutions help global organizations streamline their content processes, enabling them to deliver business-critical content with precision. From standard operating procedures, investment research reports, and fun fact sheets to product data sheets, legislation, and more, Quark's solutions work together seamlessly to address challenges at every stage of the content lifecycle. Quark, your content made brilliant. And also, we're going to give away some books at the end of today's show. We're giving away 5 copies of The Author Experience by Rick Yagadich. These are one of our 7 of 12 books that we'll have published, hopefully, by the first quarter of 2017 from the Content Wrangler Content Strategy Series from XML Press. If you're not lucky enough to win a free copy, check out xmlpress.net and look at all the books there. In fact, the publisher has a wide range of content strategy and content-related books. Or look for any of our books in the Content Wrangler series at your favorite online retailer. A few housekeeping things for everyone in the audience today as you're joining the show. You may ask a question of the presenters by using the questions button on your webinar viewing panel. Those questions are queued up and they go to me, and I will actually read them aloud based on the time allotted at the end of the show. I'll prioritize those and serve them up to the presenters, and we'll do our best to tackle as many as we can before the show ends. Before you leave, we'd like you to rate the quality of the materials provided by the presenter, so the information that they give you on a 1 to 5-star rating system using the rating button, which you can find there on your viewing panel. 1 star is the lowest rating, 5 is the highest. I'd really appreciate it if you'd do that on your way out. Also, there's a section called Attachments and Links where you can get access to content that was provided by today's guest. In fact, there is a PowerPoint copy of the slide deck, which a lot of people always ask for. There's an ebook called The CXO's Guide to Automating Policies and Procedures from Quark. There's also a request so that you can learn more about Quark there, a link so that you can do that. There's a video on DITA and why it's important from the folks at Precision Content, and a link to the Precision Content blog. So again, anytime during the show that you'd like to download those, just go ahead and do that. It won't affect your viewing experience. And yes, there is a recording of this presentation made available. In fact, if you return to the URL that you're using to view this show right now, about 5 minutes after the show is over, you can access a cloud-based version of the recording. There is embed code and a nice little link there so that you can use it in other places and share it with others, and we certainly hope that you do. All right, without further ado, let's welcome to the stage our 2 presenters. First up is Dave White. Dave, are you on the line with us today?
I am, Scott. Thank you.
Excellent. And where are you broadcasting from today?
I'm in Denver, Colorado. Cloudy and rainy today.
Cloudy and rainy. Okay, well, we need rain, and clouds aren't such a bad thing on some days. So we'll hope this is a good thing. Also, we've got on the show today Rob Hanna. Rob, are you on the line with us?
I sure am, Scott. Very happy to be here.
Excellent. Where are you broadcasting from today?
I'm from Toronto, Ontario.
So we've got Toronto, we've got a little Colorado, and us here in San Francisco where it's nice and sunny today, and the average temperature that it always is at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to step away, let you gentlemen take over the presentation. I will rejoin you at the end of the call, prioritize the questions, and let's go from there. If you need anything, just ask. I'll be in the background.
Rob?
Yes. Hi. sorry about that. Steve, yes, we're here today to talk about best practices for developing policies and procedures. And I want to thank Scott at the Content Wrangler for setting this up for us today. We have we're going to be going through several slides, and we're not necessarily going to speak to all the words in our slides. So please do download a copy of the slides after our presentation so you can dig in a little bit deeper into what it is that we've been speaking about, get some more details. So, Dave, want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I would love to, Rob, but I believe you're first.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Okay. So I am president of Precision Content Authoring Solutions in Toronto, Ontario. We help. I've been a professional technical communicator now for about 20 years and a consulting information architect over that time. Our company, Precision Content Authoring Solutions, helps companies make their information easier to use. Our solutions consist of content strategy, information architecture, development of publishing solutions, and really helping to get organizations working from unstructured to structured content. Our solutions are portable, flexible, and technology agnostic. Our services range anywhere from consulting to training to software development and scripting, right down to performing content transformation, where our staff of technical writers will help to work with your team of writers to structure and move your content into structure, mentoring writers along the way to help ease the transition. Our clients are across North America, ranging in size from small businesses to large businesses. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks. Sorry about that. We probably discussed me doing the title slide, and then I realized it made more sense for you to just keep going. So,
Sure.
So this is Dave White, CTO at Quark Software here, and responsible for a big part of our transition over the last 8 years from what. If you know of Quark, you know of probably Quark Express, our desktop product for design and layout of print and digital applications. In the last 8 years or so, we've been focusing on pivoting to providing enterprise solutions based on the idea of automating content. So helping folks go from manual processes, highly manual transforms, very stovepiped experiences, to getting out their print, web, digital, and whatever the next generation is. So we've been at this for a long time. We've got 30 years of technology behind us and a good track record of being innovators in the content space. Our customer base these days, while in the past would have looked a lot like purely pro-publishing and marketing departments, now it's a very broad range of financial organizations, government and industrial applications, as well as still a tremendous number of publishers who use our technologies for things like policies and procedures, SOPs, as standard operating procedures, as we're going to discuss today. And our solutions are all software-based. We also provide some services, but we work with partners like Precision Content in a variety of different applications. And our software stack really does help across the entire content process. So creation, the content management, the transformations and publishing, as well as technology for delivering that content to the end consumers. So today we're really focused on policies and procedures, and I thought I'd just set the background of how we think about the opportunities and the value of policies and procedures, as well as what are the modern day challenges. I think a lot of companies, the bigger you are, the more important policies and procedures become. Also, if you're in regulated environments, that's a major concern for getting policies and procedures right. And it's not just about getting them created, it's about actually getting them used. And that's probably the biggest challenge, making sure that the employees and the partners and the contractors have access to the right procedures at the right time, wherever they're required, to make sure they execute the business correctly. Because the biggest challenge is that getting the work done wrong, regardless of whether it's a security procedure, an onboarding procedure for a customer support process, a field engagement process, that getting it wrong, every dollar of work spent on getting it wrong can cost 5 to 30 times that amount in rework. So ensuring that the procedures and the policies that they're derived from are communicated well, easy to access, and used equals a better business performance, better customer satisfaction, a higher ability to execute your business the way it should be done. Doing policies and procedures right, both the authoring and delivery and communication and tracking of them, also enables the company to scale better, whether that's just natural organic growth or through acquisitions or through just adding new employees. Nothing's better than training, but training only sticks with someone as long as they are engaged in the process for which they're trained on a continual basis. When it's something that happens occasionally, having access to a source of information that explains to them how to execute that process in a way that they were trained but may not remember is crucial to allowing those employees to be effective and do the work correctly. Of course, regulation is a major impact on policies and procedures in our environment, in financial services, and in federal government. In particular, we see a very, very high focus on improving the policies and procedures processes internally and in consumption based on managing risk related to ensuring that they're adhering to the regulations. And if you're a global company, that also means requiring the ability to manage regulations at a local level, whether that's a state, a federal government, or even just the internal processes that might change across locations within an organization. And lastly is risk management, being able to ensure that you have done the right things, that you're not going to incur penalties from not being able to prove that you have accomplished what you've said you were going to accomplish in terms of defining and communicating your procedures. So, the challenge of doing so is that most organizations have begrudgingly built policies and procedures. They're often not communicated strongly. They're not easily accessible. And in the modern world where 80+% of content is consumed on a phone, being able to deliver so that that information can be consumed on mobile devices, on phones, or in traditional ways in print and on desktops means that you have to do better than the lowest common denominator, and that today is usually PDF. So even if you have a website that supports the procedures, people finding and getting access to them, that's often structured manually, and it's probably not as robust as it could be. But even if they can get to a procedure, the end result is often a PDF, and that PDF is hard to consume on a phone. It sets up a barrier and a roadblock and speed bumps to that process of getting to the procedure even being executed. So folks try to remember what it's supposed to say. They may say, I know what's best, and rather than being able to verify that, they really end up doing the wrong thing, and that represents the risk to both regulation and to the financial status of the business. So, getting to a responsive and fluid dynamic HTML, something that can be published once and consumed everywhere, is a pretty valuable step in ensuring that those policies and procedures are accessed and evaluated. Of course, they still need the traditional features of things like tables and contents and supporting of search, being able to hyperlink, having definitions available in things like glossaries and indexes, highly valuable. But the very next level is to make sure that those are engaged with the policies and procedures are engaged consistently and frequently, is adding more value to those digital experiences and things that you can't do in static print documents. Being able to provide contextual access to them. So if they're in an application environment and they need to know what the steps are to take to execute a customer refund, being able to access that policy in a contextual way is pretty valuable and something that isn't a very far reach for getting to in a digital system. browsing, filtering the content to show them what are the steps for preparation versus execution of a procedure. Being able to provide interactivity like multimedia or interactive charts that can provide them more context and more information for doing things correctly. Slideshows, et cetera, also really valuable in terms of making sure that they have a good experience and therefore return to that experience. And it's the same for all types of content, but for policies and procedures in particular, because it's something people aren't driven to do themselves in an emotional way. So getting them a positive experience allows that process to happen sooner and better. And of course, doing that in a device-appropriate way is really, really important in the modern era. However, getting to all those things, even just responsive HTML for policies and procedures, can be really expensive if you do it through traditional processes of manual labor, manual transforms, programmers getting in the process for each document that has to be delivered. And even if you did all those manual steps, you couldn't afford to do the next features and capabilities, whether that's a digital watch, a digital eyewear, or whatever the next experience might be, given the speed of which technology is changing. So that drives us to how do I do this? You're saying it's important, you're saying it's valuable, I buy into that. How do I accomplish those things without using the same processes that we've had in the past, which is usually something like a word processing tool and email to send things around until it's finally ultimately posted onto a website somewhere maybe? Well, that's where content automation comes in. So by definition, content automation is really techniques, methods, and systems for controlling any part of the content lifecycle, from initiation of an idea to the authoring to the transformation to a delivery format to ultimately the consumption of that content by a human. When do I need content automation? Well, here's a list of 10 typical quotes, right? Folks don't raise their hand and say we could solve this content automation. They talk about pain, and the pain comes from things like our information is out of date by the time it actually gets to the consumers, right? If you've got a high, regulation is changing frequently, which is happening in certain markets for sure today, getting that through your cycle faster means that you're able to execute those procedures quicker. And in particularly things like delivering PDF static documents to mobile devices, or being able to get more content and the right content, what is actually being consumed. So a whole list of items there. Invite you to read those and connect to them as you see a need. So other types of business critical content, well, there are a lot of content that fit into the vein of being appropriate for content automation. We do a lot of work on the financial services side around investment research and fund fact sheets, but right behind that, both in financial services and in other markets, is standard operating procedures and the policies associated with them. So what does content automation look like? Well, it's similar to all the steps that you're used to in your process, but it's managed better and it applies automation everywhere it can. Let me back up a slide here. Looks like that's auto forwarding, so we may see the same experience here in a moment. So on the creation side, being able to, I apologize for that, the slide's automatically progressing. So on the creation side, being able to have authors, subject matter experts create content in a way that the content is actually automatable, so you can do the transforms and create those outputs, those rich experiences, the dynamic responsive HTML that I described earlier. Doing it also on a modular level. So rather than writing documents, writing content components that allow you to assemble the components into multiple different publications or different documents that you end up delivering from a contextual standpoint. But being able to say, this procedure, which describes the opening of a bank, can be used in multiple different contexts, in multiple different geographies. It might have subtle differences across those geographies. It might have different notes on how to handle emergency circumstances that happen. But being able to say this procedure of how to handle this situation is actually the same procedure we would use in multiple different contexts. And rather than copy, paste, or rewrite that procedure, it's literally stored once and it's referenced and it's pulled into the publication on delivery, so that you have the ability to have a single source of content. It's the truth, it's easy to maintain, and when it's updated, it can be updated everywhere that it's used. Being able to manage that content and say, we know that this component of content has been reused in these multiple procedures. So when we change it, we know the impact and how many other documents we may need to update and publish, and through that automation process. And lastly, using some rich semantics to structure that content in the authoring process, making it easier for authors to do that, so that those semantics can drive things like the direction of the content, the flow of information, the presentation, the interactivity, et cetera, and ultimately get out to those rich digital experiences. So that content automation production process really does start with, how do I get the information correct up front, as opposed to manually converting it, manually laying it out into a document, manually transforming it into HTML, all the labor that's happening in stovepipe processes today for doing multi-channel delivery. And so being able to structure that experience for the author, the subject matter expert, the person that knows what needs to be captured and communicated, doing that at a component level so that you can actually have multiple authors contributing to the same publication, being able to have those components reviewed and approved in their own context so that they're ready before the entire document is ready, and then an update can be done to all of the parent documents that refer to them. Ultimately lead to a tremendous amount of value. The ability to get to a shortened time to market by writing less, by copying, pasting less, therefore having less maintenance of information, by automating that transformation into the various outputs being done not by a human that might take days, or even in some cases for long-form documents even weeks, but having that done automated in seconds or minutes. Being able to drive a higher quality, both in terms of the consistency of the content, because you are reusing by single sourcing as opposed to copying and pasting and duplicating where things can get out of sync, and by being able to do that multi-channel delivery at the same time, being able to get a PDF document out, a print document, an HTML page, or multiple different HTMLs if you need to, being able to deliver those all instantaneously as opposed to waiting for the manual process to complete, which may not happen in a timely fashion. And that ultimately reduces cost. It reduces the amount of labor that's required, so you can do more with the same amount of resources that you have today, and you get a higher value result at the end for the consumer of that content to execute their business process. So, SOP delivery and comprehension is the goal, right? Being able to actually have them used and have them comprehended is absolutely the goal. Having them out of date, having them not consistent, even branding is important. We have an experience with a sort of consumer-oriented food company. Their ability to say, actually, our internal SOPs of how we run the store need to be the same and need to be branded, because branding is important for the pride of the employees that work there. Having a good presentation, even though that policies and procedures are not necessarily customer focused and therefore a marketing opportunity, but it is still a point of emotional contact between the employee and the business itself. So having good presentation, having consistent branding, the same colors, the same look and feel, the same logos is important even in policies and procedures. Having them written in a consistent order and fashion is really important, so that the people that are comprehending it don't have to guess or reinterpret or re-understand the order of a policy in one case and a different policy in a different case is written in a different structure and order. And then ultimately, of course, trying to deliver better than a PDF is critical to the modern age of digital consumption. And so all of that leads to this content automation process affecting the what you do in the process, how you do the workflow, how you initiate the engagement, how you track all of that is a lot of what our technology offers. And the components of that system, and this is ours, but of course anybody that's offering a solution in this space would need to have the same type of components. So some type of design tool that you're not manually laying out content, but you're actually designing a template for the content to flow into. Being able to provide subject matter experts an authoring tool that supports a consistent rules-based structure, and Rob's going to talk about the details of how to accomplish that and the importance of the authoring process and how the content is created to begin with. something to manage all that. So a component content management system that understands componentized document and automated publishing. The ability to transform that incoming content into multiple outputs, whether that's PDF, HTML, of static nature or dynamic responsive HTML for mobile, or pushing it into a web content management system or other type of system of record as required. And lastly, some application, whether it's a website or in modern day maybe it's an app that delivers that content for the consumer to have, and often even supporting offline access. So when they're not connected to the web in a full-time manner, if they're a mobile employee, if they're a field employee, if they're working in a store that may have occasional connectivity, being able to have those policies and procedures pushed out while connection's available, but being able to consume them offline. So all of those make up the component of the system, and here's a diagram of our content. And so rather than spending more time talking about the process, because content management and component content management being sort of an added layer to that, getting it right starts with the actual content, not pushing files around and managing the relationship between people and files, but really getting into the details of the content. And so enhancing the content, enriching the content at the authoring stage becomes an enabler for all of the automation that happens downstream and all of the enhanced and improved customer consumption experiences that happen at the endpoint, which is truly the goal. And so I'll turn this over to Rob. And I skipped a slide there. I apologize for that. This is the slide describing what I was describing. I apologize for not forwarding the slide there. And so I'll turn it over to Rob to talk about the details of the content itself, which will drive all of what I just described. Rob?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dave. That was a great overview of describing the pain that organizations are facing and some of the more systematic and certainly process-driven parts of the solution that we really need to be addressing. But as Dave says, we're going to dig a little bit deeper now, and we're going to start with a study that we commissioned from the AIM, the Association for Information Professionals, late last year. We published a study beginning of this year, and the membership there really deals with enterprise content and information managers, creators, etc. A large organization with upwards of 80,000 members. So we sent out a comprehensive survey to look at how content is created in the enterprise. And we got a really good response. We got slightly over 300 responses to our survey. But what was really interesting is that we really covered a broad spectrum of different industries, different sizes of companies, and different geographic locations to really try to dig into issues around content creation. Now, this particular study is available for free off of our website at precisioncontent.com. So I've got a number of slides here where I'll be discussing many of the findings from that report. But if you're interested in reading it for yourself, just come out to our website and you can download that PDF from precisioncontent.com. So, of course, first thing we're going to want to know is what are the issues that we're dealing with? What did we identify through this particular study? And through this particular study, we identified issues with lack of consistency, lack of reuse, and in particular, duplication of effort. These combined serve to be a major headache for many, many organizations. So we're looking at how do we improve consistency? How do we improve reuse? How do we reduce duplication of effort? We really talk about the need to look at introducing standards within the organization. So there's the standardized technology, there's the standardized underlying format for the information that's important. But what's also important are the standards for how we write. Now, many organizations in different sectors have different types of standards already, but what we really need to look at are these standards really suited to good collaboration, good opportunities for reuse? How do we make information intelligent or smart through the introduction of content standards? All with a view to making content that's findable, usable, and reusable. So, of course, standards start with the dedicated writing teams within organizations. So finding out where these teams function and what sort of role they play in the business was also a very interesting finding. So having come from the tech-com space myself, I was a bit surprised to find out that we were the least represented in this collection, with just around 50% representing dedicated writing teams for technical publications. Policy and procedure writers, however, make up a very significant portion of this organization. So, looking at how we address structured authoring, or content standards at least, for policy and procedure writers is something that our organization is very interested in and really looking to help make breakthroughs for organizations. So, again, dealing with dedicated writing teams is one thing. Getting content standards out there, but what about the rest of the organization? So when we look at the content creation process, we can see here in the survey that dedicated content development with the development teams really represents less than 50% of all the content that content creators and organizations are working with. What about the rest of the organization? Well, the rest of the organization, as we can see from these results, are still tied up with working with documents, Word documents, PDFs, having difficult review processes and publishing and approval processes. The approval processes for many of these documents is really what holds up delivery and holds up the usefulness of this information. So we need systems to be able to better facilitate development and review of this content. So how do we get there? Well, part of what we do is we work with organizations, oftentimes outside of tech pubs, to introduce structured authoring. And structured authoring really starts with breaking the whole document paradigm that we've all come to know and love, all right, where we have one author writing one document, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 pages long reports, etc. And this content getting buried into Word documents and PDF documents that live in some document management system or network drive, very, very difficult to access and really pull out the information that we're looking to use. So first step is moving towards something we call topic-based authoring. So topic-based authoring is all about creating modular content, breaking information down into smaller units of information and managing them at a smaller level. So we start with creating units such as policies, instructions, procedures, process documents, and we break them down where we have initial topics or modules that deal exclusively with one policy or one set of instructions or one set or description of process. And we attach metadata, very fine-grained metadata to these individual topics that track reuse, approval, version, applicability, all of these different core pieces of metadata that will help us to be able to manage this information better and ensure the right information gets into the hands of the right people at the right time. So we create these topics, and then we place them into a repository where they reside and where they can be used to create any number of different information products. So this is a very, very core concept here, being able to take these topics and being able to reuse them for different information products. And really what we're talking about here is the opportunities for reusability of information. By breaking information down into topics, we make information far more reusable, such that we can take this information and assemble it into a policy manual, for instance. Or we can take that same information or different pieces of that information and create online assistance or other sort of instructions for people within the organization. And any number of other different types of output from the same source. As Dave said, the single source of truth within your organization. But what is also interesting with working with topic-based authoring and having fine-grained metadata in your content is that we're better able to manage the process of content within your organization and manage real traceability of information. As one piece of information in your organization changes, what does it impact within the overall corpus of your content? So if you change a policy, it changes a process. That process changes an instruction, right? And we can really only track this well if we're tracking it at a topic level. If we try to say this document, this 100-page document changed when this 40-page document changed when this email was distributed, it becomes much more difficult to manage. When we're working with topics and fine-grained metadata, it becomes that much easier. So looking more at topic-based authoring, it brings many benefits, but it also, of course, has many challenges. So the benefits are opportunities for much better collaboration and speed to market, finer control over the content, and better balancing of workload for dedicated teams. The challenge, of course, when we break these large documents down into topics is that we've got a lot more to manage. There are a lot more moving pieces, and so we need technology and CCMS technology to be able to manage this content. Simply putting our content into network drives is not a good solution. All right, so we look to technology like Quark's solution to be able to manage these pieces and make them available to the organization. And breaking information down also makes it a little bit more difficult in breaking that document mindset for subject matter experts and even for authors. So it's not an easy process, but it is, I think, a necessary process to really help get us to where we need to be with our enterprise policies and procedures. So when we look at what are best-of-breed organizations doing, what are the cutting-edge organizations doing when it comes to structured authoring, we ask this question about awareness of structured authoring and what organizations are actually using for structured authoring. And unfortunately, we found that most organizations aren't really aware of structured authoring and the benefits that they bring. But those that are working with some interesting pieces of technology. So first, the largest group here is, of course, working with just HTML content. So they might be policies on their SharePoint system, or it's a web CMS type of system for management of content. So a good sort of starting point for getting structured topic-based content out into the enterprise. The next one I found was interesting was information mapping. Showed up high on this survey as being used by writers within these various organizations. Now, of course, information mapping is not so much a technology as it is a writing methodology developed back in the 60s, and has really led to a lot of newer innovations in structured authoring. So core to a lot of these is an underlying technology we know as XML, or Extensible Markup Language. Now, I'm not going to go into any real details on what XML is, but I think it's important to understand that this is an open standard, and it's a standard for information that's easily read by both man and machine. But when we think about XML, when we look to introduce XML into organizations, we find many organizations are intimidated by the complexity. So what's important to sort of surface for these organizations is that really XML is everywhere. It's under the hood. It's under the covers. We don't see it. So working with Microsoft Word or even Excel, even PowerPoint, works with XML under the covers. We just don't see that complexity. And to move towards more rigorous structured authoring to be able to capture and manage better fine-grained metadata, we need to surface oftentimes a little bit of that technology. So there's always a little bit of a uneasiness moving from, well, why can't I just do this in Word? Why can't I just produce a PDF? Why do I have to use these new tools and these new systems? But it doesn't take long for an organization to see the benefit. Moving to structured authoring really serves two very fundamental needs. First one is to make information easier for people to use, and how it serves the human brain, to make information more findable, more understandable, easier to use, and easier to retain. And on the flip side, having structured content also helps technology to make that information easier to integrate into other information systems, easier to index and search, easier to process in any number of different ways, and of course make it available for reuse. Very, very important set of fundamental needs for moving forward. Now, when we think about technology, we think about smart technology like Watson. And in fact, Scott is going to be talking a little bit about smart technology at Labicon later on this month. But understanding how we need to provide intelligent machines with intelligent content is really how we're going to get to the era of intelligent machines, where we'll see huge advances in how we work with information and how we innovate. So I like to, the technology piece is very important, but we really want to look at the human brain. How do we make information structured so that we can write it better? So we have looked to any number of different research-based methods to come up with a writing methodology that really looks at user-centered design, cognitive research, instructional design, to come up with a better methodology for writing. So I mentioned information mapping, and I'm quite certain that a number of folks on this call have been or are now using information mapping with Microsoft Word, so you're familiar with that. Also, I have reason to believe that there are some of you even working with Darwin information typing architecture. So, we've really looked at information mapping, data, and other best practices to try to come up with a writing methodology that works for the enterprise, works for technical communication, and helps to facilitate structured authoring within the enterprise. So the core to what we do is breaking information down into 5 distinct types, where by breaking this information down to these types, we can assemble this information into any piece of structured content that we would use for policies and procedures and other types of documentation for the enterprise. So we describe them as, for instance, reference being something that describes things the reader needs to know. Task type information is used for instructing the reader on how to do things. And concept type information is information we reserve for explaining things that the reader needs to understand. Now, too often we use these terms interchangeably, but what we're really looking to do is we're looking at cognitive load that the reader is placed on the reader with these different types of information, where reference type information is information that we provide so that the user can know it and they can do something with it, versus something that we want to really get into and explain so that they understand, which is definitely a higher level of cognitive load for the reader. And understanding when it's appropriate and how to write it such that a reader can easily identify it and work with it. But we also have types such as process, which we use to demonstrate to the reader how things work, and principle, which we use to advise the reader about things that they need to do or not do. So principle type of information would be the core for our policy type of documents. And process information versus task or procedural type of information is also very, very interesting for policy and procedure writers, because we've seen a lot of times that organizations don't understand how to separate the two. task versus process. And so we'll have a look at that in just a moment. But just to give you an idea, an example of how these things might come together, we look to a typical flight safety briefing. Many of us, hopefully most of us, have traveled by air, and you've seen this presentation given by the cabin crew. So we have a piece of passive information, reference information. We will be flying at an altitude of 60,000 feet. So this is information that we're providing for information. We don't expect the user to do anything with it, but it's nice to know information. Next, we have principal type of information. Always put your oxygen mask on before assisting other passengers. Task information. To open the emergency exit, look out the window, pull a lever, and push out the exit door. And then we have process information. In the event of loss of cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will drop from the overhead compartment. And then finally, we have concept type of information. Out the left side of the plane, you can see a good example of a cirrus cloud. So why? Why are information types important? They're important because they inform writing styles. And having all this technology is great, but if we're not writing for that technology, if we're not writing to leverage that technology, then we're really missing the mark. Right? So we write to these different information types, and they tell us how to label or title blocks or topics of information. They tell us what type of voice and tense to use. They tell us what structures are necessary to best convey these different types of information in different circumstances. And they provide a certain set of rules around information. So let's, and having these chunks, these blocks of information that we've standardized around these writing styles allows us to create better structured building blocks for information that we can then use to assemble larger documents. And then from that same single source of truth, reconfigure those other documents using the same information or some of the same information for different purposes. So let's have a look at what we're talking about here. So here we have a typical type of procedure or task on how to do your laundry. And we can see that this task is broken up into blocks. So first block being what we call a primary block, and then all the other blocks that are used to support the title in the primary block to get this information across. Now, each of these blocks has its own type of information that's used to structure and write that information so that we can use it consistently. And then we can reuse information where possible at the block level. So let's look at the structure of a principal topic or something akin to a policy. It would also fit into such things as warnings and admonitions. And here's our typical principal structure here, where we have the title, we have the principal statement, which would be the policy statement or it would be the warning itself. And then we provide other optional types of blocks that help to explain the applicability of this particular statement. Does it apply to me, or does it apply to the night manager, or does it apply to the consumer? It explains what that applicability is. And then the outcome. What happens if I don't follow this particular policy or this statement? So how does that work? And then finally, resolution. What happens if I did accidentally stare into the laser when I was working on the shop floor? The sign said clearly, don't stare into the laser, but I did it anyway. What do I do about it? Well, seek medical attention immediately. So all of these various blocks go together to create what we call a principal type of topic. And so now we want to talk about what sort of rules. And now this is not an exhaustive list at all. It's what we can sort of really fit in just to give you an idea of what writing standards need to look like. But we look at, for instance, for how do we write a task step? Use the second person, present tense, active voice. Use clear, precise language. these all make sense, but when we put them all together, they become very, very comprehensive as an overarching content standard. We look at process. Process, unlike a task, is written in third person, active voice. And finally, we look at authoring principles. What are the rules around this? Well, again, a principle is something we write in second person, active voice, using positive language wherever we can. And separating principal information from other types of content is very, very important. And lastly, an important piece to working with principal type of information is how do we convey the appropriate level of emphasis? Is this a warning? Is this dangerous? Is it a caution? Is it a tip? Is it a nice to know? Is it a note? Is it a fast path? So being able to qualify the appropriate level of emphasis for any type of principle is key to creating and working with principal type of information. So that just gives you a really high-level look at structures and rules we put around authoring content that can be used in any type of technology. So it's not limited to working in XML data. It could work with, certainly Quark Smart Technology works very well. We can do this in Microsoft Word, in fact. We don't even need to be using structured authoring tools to apply principles of structured authoring. So I'm just going to circle back one more time back to that report and look at the conclusions that Bob Larrabee wrote when he wrote that report. And the first one is one I really, really like, and it really points to what we're doing here, and it's that the greatest advancements in information management don't lie necessarily in the technology that we're using to manage content. It lies in the content itself, the greatest advancements. We've got the technology down. We don't have the writing standards down. So when we look at writing standards, we look at how we standardize content creation, to better streamline the production of information and the management of information. And we look at the various keys to develop and implement better content creation and management strategies within our organization to really improve the usability, findability of that information within our organizations. Dave, over to you to wrap this up for us.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
So, yeah, my pleasure. So I 100% agree, and the principles that Rob's been talking about have been applied in all kinds of tools. I think the modern challenge is in mobile, is being able to take those opportunities to improve the content and deliver them in an improved way and in a way that supports modern consumption requirements. And that can be pretty tough using today's technologies, but it's not impossible. But certainly, starting with the focus on the content and enhancing the content and making the content appropriate, and the processes that deliver that content are pretty critical. So continuing to rely, and certainly scale matters. How big your company is, how many of these things you have to write, how big the audience is, matters in terms of how much investment you can put into these things. But to accomplish them, particularly for medium to large companies, global companies, continuing to try to rely on PDF delivery with email-based processes and file servers is not going to work any better than it has in the past, which most often has been pretty poor. And there are a lot of opportunities in that digital engagement experience that aren't available to you related to flat file or PDF-based deliveries. Things like being able to tool the content for analytics like you do on your marketing website. What is getting read? Who is reading it? What locations are most active? Who aren't active, more importantly, so we can find out where the challenges are related to their engagement with the policies and procedures that the company requires them to be engaged with. Being able to move that into a digital experience, really optimized for using content automation technologies, whether it's Quark's or someone else's, but being able to move out of the old world and into the new world is absolutely crucial to do this. And yes, there's a cost both in terms of emotional and effort and price to deploy new technologies associated with delivering content to the consumers, but in policies and procedures, the accomplishment is a requirement. Whether it's today, next year, or 2 years from now, it's in particular generationally, as more of the kids that are growing up today that only know digital consumption become engaged in the business life cycle in the business world. But even then, I read so much on my phone now than I ever did before. I'm 50, in case anybody cares. I'm one of those guys that I want to see this content where I'm at, when I'm at, and I want it to be device appropriate so that I get the best opportunity to comprehend the content and I'm satisfied by my experience. Doing so through an XML-based authoring tool and structured content, applying the technology and the processes that Rob were talking about around precision content, is crucial to getting it all right, getting it all to work, and making it a process that can last for years, 10, 20 years at least, until the next generation of technology dramatically changes how we consume content, whether that's new devices or new technology that directly engages our brain, who knows. So if you'd like to know more, we do have a small ebook available for download. The links are also, and I see lots of people have already engaged with the attachments and links. Rob, do you want to cover your LavaCon?
Yes, thanks, Dave. I did want to mention, I mentioned earlier that Scott Abel is going to be at LavaCon talking about intelligent machines. Precision Content's proud to be a sponsor of LavaCon this year. It's going to be in Las Vegas at the end of this month, so there's still time to sign up. And if you put in precision, use the word precision as the discount code, you'll save $100 on registration. So we invite you all to come down to Vegas this year. It's going to be fun. It's a great program. You can check it out at lavacon.org. Thanks.
Awesome.
I guess we'll pass that on to you, Scott.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. You went, you maxed out the available time here, so I'm going to go through some questions really quick. Let's see if we can do it in about a minute time. What does the word stovepipe process mean? Anybody?
I used it, so I'll describe it. And I apologize for not describing it up front. It's such a common phrase for me to use these days. If you think about how you get your print production done versus how you do your website versus how you might do your mobile, in so many cases, there are different teams that are touching the content only for that channel. So an inside team using Quark Express or InDesign for laying out print pages. A web team that takes either the Word documents or the print documents and transforms them into HTML by copy and paste and reformatting. Somebody else that does that for their mobile application. That's what I mean by stovepipe. Is every channel, every output, every exhaust port is actually driven by a different set of people who are doing manual labor.
Great. And Rob, what's the biggest mistake that people make when they go down policies and procedures pipeline without kind of thinking it all the way through?
Well, I mentioned it earlier. One of the interesting things is, having all of these different types of information intermingled in their policies and procedures. How many times have we seen we're going through a procedure, and in the middle of the procedure, there's this warning: never issue a policy to someone with a dangerous dog. You know, so we're inserting policy information in the middle of a procedure, and we're never going to find that again. We don't know where it came from. It's not written anywhere else except in the context of this little warning dialogue in the middle of a procedure. That and confusing process versus procedure too is very, very common. So breaking information down into different information types and being able to identify that can really, really make this content far more clear and effective.
30 seconds. Can you tell us why policies are connected to procedures?
Policies provide an overarching set of rules that we need to adhere to. So procedures and even processes need to fall under the umbrella of overarching policies.
Excellent. Okay, that helps out a lot. So rules govern everything, which is important.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, we're going to try to adhere to the rules and get off of this webinar in the next 30 seconds by announcing the winners of the Author Experience book by Rick Yagadich. All 5 of these folks that are listed on the screen will receive a email from my assistant Trey, who will explain how they can claim their book. And if you didn't get a chance to win a book, check them out at your favorite online retailer or at xmlpress.net. Today's show. Thank you so much. These 2 guests, Rob Hanna, thank you very much. We really appreciate you joining us, and as well to Dave White from Quark, thanks as well. Today's show is brought to you by both Quark Enterprise Solutions and Precision Content. Make sure to check out the attachment and links section to get access to their website and some of the materials that they provided on the show today. I'm Scott Abel. Thanks for joining us for our show, Best Practices for Developing Policies and Procedures. And until next time, keep doing good work. Let me know if you've got a topic or a presenter you'd like to hear from. I'm happy to do that and try to schedule it for you in the new year. You can write to us at scott@thecontentwrangler.com. Until next time, thanks so much. Bye-bye.